the aid, the humanitarian industry had taken hold of things. So these camps should remain like that forever.
So the aid agencies they're meant to help people build their own life and move on from the camp. The camp is meant to be temporary.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that aid agencies had an incentive to keep that camp as is in
Forever.
perpetuity.
It becomes an industry on its own. By the way, that is what the accusation is in Eastern Congo currently. But there have been camps there even before Goma fell or before the war, because of the chaos that has been going on in Eastern Congo. Now that these people took over FCM 23, and people have actually started going back home, who now entirely the whole group has gone home, the aid agencies are accusing M23 and AFC of causing a humanitarian disaster, because there are no longer many camps to look after. So that becomes a humanitarian disaster.
So what they're calling is a humanitarian disaster is people moving on from the camps and going home.
Yes.
But what's their incentive? So there must be a financial incentive then for them to run the camps? Because there's no other. Why else would.
Of course, there are.
So saying aid agencies.
There is money flowing into these organizations for humanitarian activities or to run these camps. If you don't have these camps of people displaced, where even if you got the money, you say, what are you, unless you go to their homes and help them from there, which would be a noble thing. But that's not what they do. They complain that they have left camps and they are not able to feed them with all kinds of things. So that becomes a political issue. As it is now it is. But it is now and it was then, 30 years ago, the same thing, the same complaint.
So instead of teaching people how to fish, their incentive is just to keep giving people fish, and that's how they.
You'll never see
make
it
money.
anywhere.
And so essentially, because Rwanda is a country that dependent on foreign aid for a long time. I think you're one of the biggest beneficiaries. 90% of GDP in the old days was from aid. I think now
In the old days.
it's about, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now it's down to like 10, 15%. You guys have done really well
Mhm.
at not depending on aid. So what you're saying is that aid is, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but aid could become a liability for a country based on what you're saying.
That is even an understatement. It is. In the long run, it is. Depends on how it is managed. And that has been a position from the beginning. We have told the people we appreciate aid. We needed it and we still need it to an extent. But we need it so that we build capacities, not to need it in the near future. That is a standard for us. That's what we say, and that's what we do.
So, again, a common friend of ours told me a story about how you were talking with other leaders about this aid. And there was instances where you're like, and I'd rather you tell the story than I, but you're like, I don't need that aid. And they're almost like they're trying to force it on you in a way.
Yeah.
Can you give me such examples?
It has been discussion. These discussions have dominated many years, and many conversations we have had between those who need support, aid support, those who... And the question for us has always been, we need it. We can put a date to it. We can show where we need it, but we also work out how to get out of it. And this is something we have with us. We share with anyone who wants to do work relating to aid with us. But that has attracted a lot of problems for us. Some of us even thinking, I mean, we have been branded either arrogant or insensitive or dictatorial or all kinds of names just because of that.
Because you don't want aid.
Because we say, and we try to differentiate things. It's not that we don't want aid for the sake of not wanting it. We are saying aid creates dependency, but not only a dependency. Dependency is on the good side. I mean, the better side even. The other one is whoever gives you aid controls your life. In fact, that's why they want you to stay with aid, so they continue controlling your life. And even threaten, use it as a tool to direct you where they want you to go. They keep threatening you, if you don't do this, we will switch off.
It's politically
Oh, yeah,
weaponizing aid.
it is weaponized, absolutely. Quote me on that.
And so how does that work? How can you tell an aid organization or someone, I don't want aid, and they're like, no, you have to take it? Like, can you give me an example of such an interaction?
Well, let me tell you as an interaction. In 1998 or 9, no, I think 8, we used to get a lot of aid because of the situation we were in, 98.
That's 4 years after the genocide.
Yes. And many European developed countries, ministers used to come visit, see the needs and so on and so forth. One time I had a conversation with a number of them. In fact, one, starting with one, I remember a lady, she was called Claire Short. She was UK, International Development Minister of UK. We had a long conversation, and I told her, I said, you know what, it's still too early for us to say much, but I think, and I told her, I think it's not too early for that effort. I said, I appreciate your aid a lot. It's almost indispensable in that situation as we're in. I said, but at the same time, I want to start early to be responsible. And I keep talking to our ministers and other leaders that we need to start early being responsible for ourselves. And these, again, were lessons learned from our past, what we went through. And I said, I want you to think about giving us aid, but on the basis that you and us agree on where to put this money you give us. You don't walk in with the bags of money and say, for me, I'm putting it there. You say, this is our country. We want you to come with these bags of money, and you find us here, and we have a conversation about what meets your interests, where do you want your money to go with us, but you must consider where we want the money to go also. Because in the end, we are the ones responsible.
What did she say?
She agreed.
Okay, that's good.
Fortunately, she agreed.
That's a good interaction.
At first, she was like, who is this one now?
Was there interactions?
But later on, we agreed.
Was there interactions that were not as positive?
You know, let me show you. So we reached an agreement with her eventually. But interestingly, she invited other ministers of countries, I think, that were friendly to UK or friendly to them. They came with there were 3, 2 other ministers on top of her from different countries. And she wanted me to tell them what I had told her, because she wanted them to listen to what I was saying. And we did. And for some of those 2, they started He would say, no, but our people will not accept this. I said, okay, why should your people have a problem? On top of that, I had suggested to her that not only will you give us money, determine where to go, where to put this money by you and us, but we want you to follow up and make sure that we used your money correctly where we agreed. So we should have an audit, maybe after every 3 years.
You've asked them for an audit.
We were asking, yes, we said we should have audit. They would audit all of us. They would audit you if you really gave us the money you promised you would give us. And if we use the money the way we agreed we are going to use it, and this money was not lost in the hands of people who stole it or something. And it worked. Later on, these two were also convinced. So with the 3 countries, they gave us the money, was followed up, audits were made, and they found we were just putting the money they gave us where we had agreed with.
So it went how it should go.
That's how it should. I mean, there's no question about it.
What about USAID, for example? How is the experience with them?
I'm not deeply. I don't have much knowledge about them and so on, but I'll tell you on the surface of it, at least what I experienced. Both when I was still a kid, living in a refugee camp, and I remember we used to see a lot of things coming to us. Sometimes it would be fish, then another time cooking oil, then labeled USAID. And so I fed off USAID, if you will.
So you're dependent on them.
Yes,
you and your family dependent on USAID as a kid.
I definitely did as a kid. Yeah, but that is telling part of the story. I was in a refugee camp. In fact, the first thing is to even resolve the problem so that there are no refugees. Okay? The second is you keep feeding people, like in other cases, until when? Does it become something that stays forever with the people? And if people just remain grateful that they're being fed and that's it? So there are 2 parts to that earlier story, as I said. They were not the ones who made us refugees. That's not something to blame them on.
But they didn't care about getting you to become independent and move on from being a refugee.
Yes, because and since USAID is also connected with the government, say, of the United States, they should at the same time using their leverage, whatever they have, to address the problems of people who are displaced or who are refugees, so that those other issues are also addressed. And picking it from here, from USAID, for me when I was a kid, and the other story I told you of humanitarian assistance needed by camps in Eastern Congo, I always see, so this is, let's say in Eastern Congo, you have camps. They would stay there for maybe 4 or 5 years. And it's supposed to be so forever. A situation like this one happens, however it happened, people are now removed from camps, they go back homes, whichever home, if they had homes, whichever places. And then there is a complaint that, this is a bigger disaster. That people have gone home is
Instead
a bigger
of being called a
disaster.
success, it's being called a disaster.
Yes, so it's there's therefore that mentality, there's that of dependency that, and it works across politics. It's not just one part